Ignition running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Good evening. It's Eric Erickson here. We are starting an hour early here on News 95.5 AM 750 WSB. Joining me in studio is the Georgia Secretary of State, Brian Kemp. Thanks for joining me.
Hey, great to be on with you, Eric. Thanks for having me.
So the reason I'm glad you're able to get in here today is we had this story from the Associated Press that has circulated and just been burning up the internet that there were 53,000 voters on a pending list that Democrats and a lot of people in the national media have said you're denying them the right to vote, and your office has now reviewed the matter, and I know the facts and what have been reported are not necessarily the same thing.
No, there's no question about it. That's what's been frustrating with people that write one article. You know, everybody else picks up on it. You know, people like the New York Times, Huffington Post, and others that are in the tank for liberal Stacey Abrams start writing these, horror stories about me, the great folks that are working as our county registrars, because that's really who's doing this work all across state in all 159 counties. But we've been fighting back to get the truth out there, and the truth is on our side. It has been during this election cycle. It was in 2014 when they tried this, and it certainly was in 2016 when they tried it before the presidential election. And it's not going to work at the end of the day. No one's having trouble voting. It's very ironic that we have this whole, narrative out there, and every day the media is reporting how we have a record turnout for advanced voting in person since it started last Monday, and we continue to see long lines everywhere. People are voting. No one's having trouble voting, and this is really just a headline to take away from her extreme agenda.
Well, people have been voting, and in fact, the 2016 voter registration numbers were up year over year. There's the latest report now that you've deregistered massive numbers of people. I actually looked into this myself and discovered the Secretary of State office does not do that in election years, and those are people who hadn't voted in 7 years and hadn't responded to the Secretary of State's office to verify registration.
Well, and I think it's important for people to know, too, look, we are following processes that are in the law, and there's a reason that you want to keep your voter rolls secure. A lot of these people that are saying on this pending list that's out there, at any given time, we may have 75,000 people on the pending list. My daughter, Lucy, was on the pending list until she turned 18 just a few days ago, because in Georgia you can register to vote when you're 17 and a half, but when you turn 18, you automatically go to an active status. That's how the process works. There are other people that used a fake address with a street name only, no street number, no street type. That failed to match the U.S. Census data that's out there. We've got over 3,000 people that are on the pending list because their citizenship could not be verified. And it is state law that we verify people's citizenship before we register them to vote, just like you do when you get your Georgia driver's license. There's also over 5,800 people that are pending, but they match another active or inactive voter in the database, meaning that person got flagged because you could have a double, someone registering or being on the rolls twice. It's supposed to catch those kind of things, and you want it to do that.
Okay, so let me just stop you there. You're reviewing these numbers. So 9,224 are pending because they're 17 and a half years old or so. You can register to vote, and then you become active. 2,935 have a fake address. 3,393 are pending because we couldn't verify citizenship, which we're required to do. Right. 5,842 are pending because they match someone who's already registered to vote. And so you're left with roughly 46,000 on the pending file. And now my understanding from people in the Secretary of State's office is that 75% on the list are on the list because their Social Security number doesn't match.
That's exactly right.
So
that is a federal process, that was pre-cleared to check, to do the citizenship verification. It was pre-cleared by the Obama Justice Department when Eric Holder was the Attorney General. So they are blaming me for a process that was approved under President Obama, which is outrageous that they're even talking about this. And you don't want to register people if their social, the last four of their social doesn't match up. Because what happens if, it's not them? What happens if they're using, a number that they don't know whose it is? But you can always register without using your social by simply using the online voter registration system or registering at your county elections office with your Georgia ID that you can get if you don't want a driver's license, or your Georgia driver's license. But these individuals elected not to do that, and therefore they have a problem, and that's why they're pending in the system.
So now, one of the Associated Press mentioned a lady, Aptly Nunez, as one of their voters who were on the pending file, and the Associated Press says that she was flagged because of the hyphen between her names, but my understanding from talking to folks in your office is that she actually is an active voter, unlike what the Associated Press reported. She
is. So what we found was she was in the system as an active voter. She re-registered for whatever reason. Maybe she didn't think she was on the rolls. Maybe she wanted to see if she would get registered again, testing the system. Who knows what happened here. But basically, when she re-registered, she misspelled her own name. So it did not match the name in the current system or the name, on her verification documents. Therefore, she was flagged in the pending system. And that is the individual that they're calling me a voter suppressor over. And I just hope the people of this great state would realize that, they are not being told the truth here. They're being lied to. It was done 2 years ago before the presidential election, the same type madness. It was done in 2014 by the New Georgia Project, the group that Stacey Abrams set up. You remember they had the press conference with boxes of files, 84,000 people on the list, and we won when they took us to court on all 10 counts because it was outrageous. I mean, one of the persons, Eric, and I know that you and I both would love to have this person registered in Georgia, but one of the pending applications is Jesus Christ of Heaven Street. Well, we can't register.
Now, Heaven Street, that's in the North Georgia mountains from what they tell me, up in the Blue Ridge area.
Well, that's not surprising. God-fearing people up there.
Yeah. So now let's back up, because you mentioned the New Georgia Project, which was a nonprofit Stacey Abrams started to register people to vote. And from what I'm hearing you say, a number of the people who were flagged because the Social Security numbers don't match actually came from this group.
Yeah, I think like 14% of the people that are still being held over are from 2014, so they act like this is some new, breaking news story. I mean, these are people that the New Georgia Project signed up in 2014. They never came in to correct their form. I've talked to many, many folks at the county level that were dealing with the New Georgia Project and these forms that was missing information. And when you talk to them, a good example is over in Muskogee County. They had forms that were turned in from the New Georgia Project back then in 2014 that had an Alabama address. Well, we cannot register someone to vote from Alabama in the state of Georgia. They had, people's, made-up names on the forms, missing birth dates, missing addresses. I mean, we cannot register. The counties cannot register people that we don't know how old they are if that verification piece is not on there, or where their house is, because we have to know, and the county registrar has to know what district that person is in so they can get them the correct ballot. And if those individuals do exist, which I doubt that they do, because there were 17 people that we did an investigation on of the New Georgia Project that had been turned over to prosecution at the Attorney General's office for signature frauds and misrepresenting a Georgia voter on that form by fraudulently signing their signature. That you can't process those applications unless you get that information. That is the law that we have in Georgia, and the counties are following the law. And those people have been around ever since then. They're still on the list. We haven't taken them out, but they still have never verified, which makes me believe that they do not exist.
So It sounds like, if I'm hearing you right, and the information from folks within the Secretary of State's office that I've talked to, that a lot of the problems are from Abrams' own nonprofit from 2014, where she was trying to register Democrats to shift the state. Those people may or may not exist. They haven't come forward. And it seems awful convenient that suddenly in the last month of this campaign, suddenly there's a very well-documented story out from people affiliated with this group. I mean, it sounds like they tried to set up at least a media storm.
Well, they're trying to blame me for a problem that they created. You know, one of the first things I did when I got in the Secretary of State's office, I started working with the legislature to create online voter registration in our state, where literally 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, anybody that wanted to register to vote could go online either through the Secretary of State's website and register to vote. All they had to do was fill out the information exactly like it was on their driver's license or their Georgia-issued ID card. So take, for instance, somebody that was a 16-year-old. They turn 16, they go past their driver's test, they get their driver's license. When they become 17 and a half, they can register to vote in the state, and when they become 18, they can legally participate in the election. So any time between when they turn 17 and a half through, on, they can register to vote, and all they have to do is go online, fill the information out exactly like it is on their driver's license. If the New Georgia Project had used the app when they were registering all these people to vote, when they were paying these canvassers to go hang out at restaurants and different places, then they would have registered to vote. There wouldn't have been any of these errors. So they are blaming me for these errors. And what's ironic is Stacey Abrams voted against online voter registration. and if she'd have been using that, they wouldn't have these problems. And then we created, our free mobile app where you can get your sample ballot. You can track your electronic overseas ballot through there, which I created. I mean, it's just.
I want to ask you some questions about that. We got to take a quick time out, and when we come back, more with Brian Kemp, Secretary of State, Republican candidate for governor, and what we're finding out after this review of all these pending voter registration numbers. It is 26 after the hour. Eric Erickson here, News 95.5, AM 750 WSB. Joining me in studio today, the Georgia Secretary of State, Brian Kemp, running for governor. And we've been talking about the voter registration issue and the complaint lodged against your office. One of the late-breaking stories I'm seeing circulating in the media, which I know, having been an elections lawyer, is just not being reported factually, are how the Secretary of State's office removes people from voter rolls, that it's a 7-year process. If you wouldn't mind addressing that for a minute.
No, we deal with this one every 2 years as well. We've done it many times in the past. We're following federal law, the Help America Vote Act, to keep the voting rolls up to speed. And, basically what you do is you get somebody, if they're a registered voter and they're active, and for some reason they don't participate over 2 general election cycles, which would be at least a 3-year period, then they are considered to be, or thought to be, maybe an inactive voter. So the county registrar will send them a letter asking them, are you still at this address? Because what happens is people will move, they'll change neighborhoods, they'll move out of state, so they'll quit voting here, they're voting in another state, and you don't want people registered in 2 states. So you send the letter. If they answer the letter or do anything to their record, even if they sign a petition for a recall, if they go in and change their address, anything they do in their system would get them out of that potential status to be looked at. And then if they don't answer the letter, then they move from active to inactive. So they're still on the rolls. If they were inactive, all they got to do, just like these pending people that we have now, if they just go up, show up and vote, show their photo ID, they'll be moved, back into the active status. But if they then miss 2 general elections again, we'll send them the county will send them another letter. And then if they don't reply to that letter, then they're, end up being removed from the roll. But this is like a 7-year process.
Yeah. So when you say two election cycles, that's 2 2-year periods, not a local municipal elections and state elections.
It's not like presidential races. It would be 2 federal elections basically. So you could have a presidential year, and then the next year when your congressman has to run again.
Right.
That would be those 2 cycles. And if somebody doesn't participate in either one of those, then they would get that first letter. And the left just calls this outrageous. And the thing is, they don't want us to remove people. They want dead people to remain on the rolls.
Well, when we come back, I want to talk to you about that and the fraud issue in election integrity in Georgia with all the rumors about Russia. It is 36 after the hour. Eric Erickson here, News 95.5 AM 750 WSB. Joining me in studio is Georgia Secretary of State Brian Kemp. Thanks for doing this. Now, we've talked about the voter registration issues, the pending file, how people are actually made inactive, how they're removed from the rolls. And it seems for the last 2 years we've just heard nonstop about election integrity issues. It seems like the Democrats have raised those more than most, and that they should like the fact that we make sure people who shouldn't vote aren't voting, including Russians, but suddenly they're upset about it.
Well, and I think it's all has to do with targeting me, quite honestly. A lot of the things that they're talking about on election integrity, they've been talking about our voting equipment, even though I've taken the lead on moving us to a 21st century voting system, doing a pilot project way back in the fall of 2017. They have just forgotten that. We got into the session last year. The legislature debated that for a very long time. Couldn't get any legislation done, so immediately after session, I took the lead once again, put together the SAFE Commission, the Secure, Accessible, Fair Elections Commission, bipartisan, Republican, Democrats, Libertarians, independents. We got county elections officials. Anyway, it's a great group. We're assessing voting equipment that could be available. We'll get recommendations for the legislature for this year, and if everything goes right, we get the funding. We'll implement a new voting system in 2020, which I support moving to a system that has a verifiable paper audit trail. I think that's what everybody wants. But we're taking the lead on that, but I can assure folks that the processes that we have and the system we have now is very secure. We have done a lot to protect the system. We've never been hacked, despite what the Democrats would tell you in the narrative that they're trying to put out there, and we continue to fight that every day. But we're going to have secure elections in Georgia, and we're going to have accessible elections. I always tell people we want to make it easy to vote and hard to cheat.
Well, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about Southwest Georgia after the hurricane and the devastation down there, how the elections process will work down there, including in magical, mysterious Glasgow County.
Yeah. Well, Glasscock County is not in Southwest Georgia, but that's a whole nother tangent. I've been down.
I think, by the way, I did read somewhere that in the magical, mysterious Glasgow County of South Georgia, that Elizabeth Warren actually is a Cherokee. But
Well, I'll let you continue that narrative. I'll stick to voting and the great response that our local county elections officials and registrars have done in the wake of that devastating storm. I've been down there twice. Continue to pray for those folks. We've helped with some relief efforts from our campaign perspective. My wife Marty got caught driving a forklift the other day loading the truck, so people are very grateful for the help that they're getting. Our federal and state response has been unreal. But those county elections officials, even with the devastation that they've seen in their own homes and in their local community, started advanced voting with using generators, not having air conditioning to give people the ability to cast their ballot on that very first day. I think we only had 2 counties that could not do that. We got the governor to do an executive order to give them a couple of days because it was just an unsafe environment in Seminole and Miller County. But they're all up and running now. People are voting. I know that those Georgians have more on their mind than an election, and rightly so with the devastation that they've seen. But very proud of those hardworking folks that got things together down there. And I'm proud of our team in the Secretary of State's office. I took Chris Harvey, the chief elections official under myself that runs the division over there. And, he got to see that firsthand, meet with those folks, and we've been working with them from day one to see what we needed. Other counties that weren't effective have been a resource for them as well, and it just shows what Georgians do in tough times. They come together and help their neighbor, and our response has been great. And that's really, I told a lot of people, seeing that response on the ground down there, seeing how hard those folks were working, how folks in our office volunteered to help us well with GEMA. Makes me proud to be a Georgian.
That's good to hear. I want to shift gears from there into the actual campaign against Stacey Abrams. Moving beyond your role as Secretary of State, there's some striking contrasts that have really shaken up between you and Stacey Abrams, including her vision last week down in southeast Georgia about the role of the governor to be able to transition people from agriculture and hospitality jobs into renewable energy jobs because of climate change. I didn't know the governor in Georgia actually had the power to do that.
Well, I know there's a lot of people in rural Georgia and a lot of people that work in our great hospitality industry and really people in general that were outraged by those comments. Just to even, come out and say that was really quite shocking. I mean, agriculture's the number one industry in the state. It makes our growing port in Savannah so great. Also, the port in Brunswick. I mean, it's helping drive the rural economy. And look, it's feeding our people, it's clothing our people in the state, and literally people all over the world. I mean, we are the breadbasket of the South. I think there's much that we can do in agriculture. So that was very disappointing that, she would think that people shouldn't have to go into agriculture here in Georgia. People want to go into agriculture. I've been talking to my own kids about potentially going into the ag program in college because there's just such great jobs out there, especially even for females, which is appealing to me, having 3 teenage daughters. And I've seen that firsthand. When I was in the legislature, I worked a lot with research and extension, which literally covers all parts of our state, supporting our farmers and our agribusiness people. And it's just, we're the leader in the world in ag when you think about things like blueberry production, a lot of peaches, obviously broiler chickens, eggs, cattle, beef, all kind of different row crops. Certainly cotton and peanuts are going to be, especially cotton, very challenging this year, and our pecan farmers just absolutely took it on the chin in southwest Georgia. But, there's a lot of good things that are going on right now with the federal and state response, and I'm going to be a governor that's going to continue that and work with those folks, and we're going to make southwest Georgia stronger than ever before over the next 8 years.
Well, the other divide that seems to be shaping up is the Atlanta versus out of Atlanta divide, and it seems like my impression of the campaigns is you're running a very Georgia-focused campaign, and I think naturally her constituency is mostly urban and focusing very much on Atlanta. But I continue when I travel around the state to see this divide between Atlanta versus the rest of us, sort of dynamic that I don't know that it's necessarily fair, but it's one that her campaign seems to be amplifying just in its language catering just to Atlanta.
Well, and I think I want to be a governor that represents our whole state. I think we got a lot of tough issues we're facing in rural Georgia when you think about people don't have access to high-speed internet so their kids can simply do their homework at night. People are moving away because there's no jobs and opportunity. That makes it tough on rural hospitals, and that's why I have a plan to deal with those by increasing the rural hospital tax credit. That's something that Lieutenant Governor candidate Jeff Duncan and I have committed to doing, and those kind of things will absolutely move the needle. But we're not giving up on the metro area. I mean, right. Just the opposite. We're fighting for every vote that we can get up here, and I think Georgians should really look at the policies and proposals and the records of the two candidates and think about issues that matter to them. I want to cut taxes. I want to continue the tax cut that we got to the state income tax last year, next year. That's the plan. She said she wanted to reverse what Governor Deal and the legislature did. When you think about education, we rolled out a plan the other day to invest in public education, give our teachers a $5,000 pay raise. We have 44% of our teachers that leave the profession in the first 5 years. I mean, we have heard that on the ground in our schools and from people that are running or work in our schools. That's a big problem, so we're addressing it. We rolled out a robust school safety plan to help schools protect themselves from the inside out. That goes for putting a counselor in every high school in the state to help with behavioral health issues, and then also funding for school security. And that goes with complete local control. You think about health care policy. Stacey Abrams wants a radical takeover of government health care to a single-payer system, doing away with Medicaid and Medicare. It's going to raise your taxes. You're not going to be able to tell, who your doctor's going to be, and it's going to make your current insurance plan illegal. I mean, those are radical positions, and there's very big differences, and I think Georgians need to understand about that.
I want to jump back real quick to education because you have mentioned giving teachers pay raises, and I was kind of surprised to hear a Democrat on the campaign trail say that it's not possible and that nobody should believe you.
Well, if that's all she had to say when we rolled out a teacher pay raise, I think that's actually a good thing, because I think people, if they really went back and look at my record of campaigning for the legislature in the 4 years that I served, I did what I told people I was going to do. I went back home for 3 years, helped Marty raise the girls, focused on some business stuff, and came back as Secretary of State. Ran with a very specific agenda of using technology to make the office more efficient and effective and lower cost, and also ran on having secure elections. So we've already been through the secure elections part. But we've also, our new systems, whether it's corporations, our voter registration system that we have now, easier to use. We've saved millions of dollars doing that, and they're working great. So I absolutely have a history of doing what I say, and that's why, when we roll that teacher pay raise package out with our school safety package and other things that we've done, we are accounting for that money that we're spending. I'm implementing a spending cap, and I'm planning to do that. But it also means that when you do that, you can pay for your priorities in state government. And my priority is going to be public education and education in general. That includes paying our teachers correctly, because that's one of the big issues that we've got in our state. And for her to say that I can't do that is ridiculous. On the other hand, you have to look at what she's proposing. She's taking the same pot of money that's available to the next governor, and she's spending it 3 or 4 times, saying she wants to do this big government program and that big government program. And if you really dig into the numbers, that is simply not going to work. So I'm looking forward to working on those issues and moving the needle on it.
Well, listen, I want to go on, if I can, Andrew, in there. I want to go on and take a quick time out, because when I come back, I want to circle back to the beginning of the Associated Press story and the information on registered voters. Get back and find, in the last couple of minutes we have here, go back to that, because I think it's such a big issue. And I know the media is not going to cover it as much as it should after beating you up for weeks. And now we know 75% of those people probably don't exist. So we'll take a quick time out and be right back. Welcome back. Final few minutes with Secretary of State Brian Kemp. We've been reviewing in studio this complaint, the Associated Press and others saying that there were 53,000 people on a pending voter file who wouldn't be able to vote. It turns out if they show up to vote, they actually can vote.
They absolutely can. Just show up to the polling location, do like every other Georgian has to do that's voting in person, and pull their driver's license or state-issued ID card out, and they can vote in this election. Now,
let me run through these numbers, though. So we've got 9,224 are pending because they're not yet 18. They registered. They'll become active when they're 18. 2,935 used a fake address. 3,393 are pending because we can't verify their citizenship. 5,842 are pending because they match another active voter. So that leaves about 46,000, and 75% on the list don't match the federal Social Security database that federal law requires you to check.
Yeah, and that's a federal process that was or federal approval process that went through the Obama administration, the Eric Holder Justice Department, and I'm getting blamed because somebody can't fill their Social Security number, at least the last 4 digits, out correctly, or they don't know what their Social Security number is, or that person doesn't exist and they were using the last 4 of somebody's Social Security number. Who knows what happens? But look, we have to verify citizenship. That is the law in Georgia, to verify citizenship, just like we do when someone gets a driver's license. And Eric, I think it's good to note, when you think about these 46,000 people that are left, and then the 75,000 of them that mismatched on the Social Security information that was approved by the Obama Justice Department.
75%. Yeah.
I mean, 75%, yeah, and by Obama and Eric Holder. This is out of nearly 7 million people that are on our voting rolls. So when you run those numbers, I mean, it's a very small percentage of people that we're talking about, but it is a problem that Stacey Abrams' New Georgia project created because their canvassers could not get folks to fill the forms out right that they're sending to county registrars to put into the system. This is not even me or the Secretary of State's office doing this. This is the county registrar that are flagging these folks, and they're entering all the information they got, and they're in a pending status. And if they just show up, show their ID, they can absolutely go vote. But they haven't done that. And you know, it's really ridiculous that this is a manufactured crisis to take away from her extreme agenda of, quite honestly, like she said the other day, wanting non-citizens to vote in our election and vote for her for governor. I mean, that's illegal, and she knows it.
When we come back, I'm going to have more on that and the other data. Thank you very much for spending an hour with us on this.
Oh, great. Thanks for having me on so we could clear the record and get the truth out there. You can learn more at kempforgovernor.com, and I'd appreciate your vote and support.